Welcome to Hospitality on the Rise, the podcast about the people shaping the hospitality industry and their journeys. I'm your host, Alice Cheng, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, hospitality's go-to hiring platform. And I'm here to give you your dose of virtual mentorship. Here, we'll be sharing the stories, lessons learned, and advice from hospitality leaders who've carved out their own path to success. After all, this industry is where many get their start and go on to do incredible things. Whether you're a pro, starting out, or just love the hustle, this podcast highlights what makes hospitality extraordinary: the people. I'm so excited to have Raj Vaidya here with us today. Raj is the founder and private wine consultant of Raj Wine Consulting, a very, very decorated career that has taken him to many different places. So we can't wait to hear about that. Raj, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Alice. Great to see you again.
You as well. And, for the listeners and the watchers here, Raj actually holds a very special place in my heart and also Culinary Agents, and a great example of, people we meet along the way and who just want to help. And Raj, 13 years ago or so, I met Raj, and he was very fond of Culinary Agents' idea at the time. Said, "Sure, I'll make an introduction for you." And lo and behold, here we are. And that was when you were working at Danielle.
And you were still at IBM, so it was pre-launch. Yeah.
It was pre-launch. I have this idea, but I need somebody to validate it. So thank you again, Raj. But anyway, we don't want to hear about me. We want to hear about you. Tell me, take me back to, how did it all begin? How did you get into the industry?
Well, I was born in the U.S., but I lived in Asia most of my youth. And so when I was a recent immigrant, as opposed to immigrant, back into the U.S. As a teenager, first time really living here as a semi-adult person, I looked for the job I could get. And so the restaurant industry, specifically at the time, quick service, that kind of thing, was the most available. It was like, what job can I walk to? Because I didn't have a car and I was 15 years old. And, I had no skills that were very specific that I could have exercised, but I wanted to work. And so I found my way into the business by way of cooking a little bit, working at a bagel shop first in New Jersey, believe it or not, overnight cooking the bagels, and then found, a path through culinary side and then eventually front of house all through high school and through college.
And when you were doing that, was it at that point, were you ever thinking about the wine world yet? Like, when did wine enter the
Not at
chat?
all. Not at all. I mean, I wasn't much of a drinker, certainly, even as a teenager. I had other poisons that were, more consuming to me than alcohol at the time. But I noticed that it was important as I started working in front of house and started working in restaurants where we sold alcohol, that if I had some modicum of knowledge or some sense of expertise, or at least a cursory understanding of our offerings, and could explain them to my clients, the guests, I had the opportunity to increase the sales. And of course, that benefited my pocket. So I was interested in it from that standpoint primarily, even going into college. Found a taste for the drink by way of a few very, very nice bottles of wine that I was very lucky to consume, and just kind of started studying mostly out of interest, because I found it kind of fascinating, the notion that you could learn about so many different aspects of the world, so many different things about the world: viticulture, which is to say horticulture, plants, farming, history, culture, economics, international economics, that kind of thing. So I found it very engaging. And then found my way to working in wine sort of later in college. Again, it was just kind of bit by the bug. I had left the restaurant business for a while, but I came back to it because I didn't like the alternatives. I kind of said to the chef I'd been working for, "Hey, I need my old job back. I don't know what I'm going to do with my career, but I know I'm not going to do what I'm doing now." And he said, "Well, I don't really have that job, but I need a sommelier." And I said, "I don't really know very much about wine." And his response was, "Well, you're smart. You'll figure it out." And so I kind of just did. I found my way into it kind of ass backwards.
Yeah, and it's that's why these stories are so great, because people kind of stumble in different directions, and wine is one of those things where we get asked really often, like, how do you actually get, people who want to get into it but don't know how, or what comes first? Do you get the front of house experience first and then go into wine, or do you just go straight into wine? I mean, You kind
Oh,
of,
I have strong opinions about that because I went the route of understanding first back of the house, starting in a dish pit, cooking, cleaning, and then finding your way into the front of house in every position. I believe that in a restaurant scenario, to be a sommelier, it's super important to have a grounding in the rest of the industry and having some background in service. That said, that's not important to become an expert in wine per se. But there is another element to it, which is that if you're getting started in wine and you're interested in wine, you really want to learn about wine, the you can the number of paths you can choose are substantial. Obviously, you can engage in online courses. You can sign up for many of the different educational platforms that there are and organizations that there are. But you never learn about wine more robustly or more acutely than when you're tasting wine. And the best scenario in which you taste wine is working in wine in a restaurant. And the reason for that is simply you're opening more bottles and getting a chance to taste them than you would be, for example, in retail, or if you were working for a distributor, you'd only be able to taste the wines you're selling. You have a wide range of possibilities of what you're tasting. And the other beautiful thing is that you get an opportunity to taste the same wines over and over again when you work in a restaurant. And I think that's invaluable because understanding that wine isn't one thing. You taste a wine, you can't understand it forever. It's a moment in time. It's a snapshot. And you only really get that perspective from working in restaurants. And so in a sense, becoming a busboy first may be important to becoming involved in wine in general, because I see that as the best path for education.
yeah, I love that perspective. And, we always talk about this industry building foundation and then having opportunities. Basically, once you build a foundation, you can go in any direction that you want. And you can go, down one path really far and then decide that that's not for you and come all the way back full circle. And meet, great people and knowledgeable people along the way who can help you with that. So were you uh, can you remember a moment where you were like, okay, wine is going to be my thing? Like it's going to,
Uh, it was shortly into that position as a sommelier for the first time, and it seemed interesting to me to work in wine. Obviously, there was some luster around the position. It was a highly specialized role. The clients really wanted to engage with you, even if at the time I was completely wearing the emperor's new clothes and was full of shit and didn't really know very much about wine. I still felt a little bit of the star power, so that was enticing. But then it really clicked. Again, I kind of referenced this when I realized what an all-encompassing or many different discipline encompassing subject it was, and realized that the culmination of that experientially can be so intellectually stimulating, but also at the same time sensual and wonderful and taste so special. It was a bottle of wine that convinced me. Sort of made me realize in the moment, and I remember the bottle of wine vividly. It was the first time I tasted an older Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, and it was at that first restaurant that I was a sommelier. Somebody ordered the bottle, and it was hilariously inexpensive in retrospect, but a huge deal in the moment. This was probably in 2003, maybe 2002 actually. And the bottle of wine was valued at about $1,000 on the wine list, and today legitimately sells at auction in excess of $9,000 a bottle. And it just blew my mind. It was so beguiling that tasting this and then thinking about when it was picked and all the time that it had been cultivated prior to picking, all the years, decades even, the people who were involved in it, many of whom weren't alive anymore. All of that kind of came to me in an instant in realizing like the breadth of the kind of experience that you get. And in that moment, I also realized that all of that work, all of that intention, all of that history all led up to one purpose, and the purpose was being consumed. And in that moment, I was fulfilling the purpose, and I just thought that was really beautiful and vaguely poetic, and fell in love with it. And I said, I can't believe I get to do this for a living. At the time, I was making so little money that it's amazing I could live off of it. And in retrospect, when I think about it, I thought it was such a great job coming out of college, even though it wasn't that much money, because I got to do something I cared about, and it was tactile and energetic and visceral human connections you make in the hospitality world. But then when I realized that there was this added layer when it came to wine, I said, this is it for me.
great, great. Oh, I got little goosebump from that story. Thank you for sharing. And I love asking that because you could see, I could see you going back to that moment as well. So thank you. For those of you who are listening and not watching. So now you're hooked. This is your thing. You're going to do this. How are you thinking about, okay, how do I make this into a career? Where do I want to work? Who do I want to learn from? Like, did you?
Yeah. I didn't really have, on account of having sort of been hired into it out of the restaurant's necessity and my luck, frankly, luck of opportunity, which is definitely a hallmark of my career, and I think of many people's careers, whether they're happy to admit it or not. I didn't have a formal mentor when it came to wine. Legitimately, when I got that job, I would like read Karen McNeil's wine Bible in the daytime and then go on the floor at night and recite verbatim what I'd read, pretending that they pertained to the wines that were on the wine list. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But I started visiting winemakers early. I started kind of like getting more engagement with the trade, and started learning from producers more than from purveyors, which were my options at the time. And quickly realized that that's the route I preferred. I mean, there were options laid out in front of me in terms of education. I took one course, the Sommelier Society of America, and we were tasting these wines and talking about them, these appellations. And, the quality of the wines we were tasting and the level of education that the other people in the class had didn't really compare with the experience I was having opening bottles of wine at the restaurant. And so I just kind of gave it up after a while. And then I was seeking mentorship, but I didn't really find it by way of wine people. I found it by way of chefs. So the first chef I worked for was a very serious guy when it came to wine, Craig Shelton, who had a restaurant out in New Jersey, which was my first wine job at the Ryland Inn. The place is still there, but it's a different ballgame now. He was a Relais and Chateau restaurant. And he introduced me to that world of, Michelin caliber restaurants in America. And he was also pretty special. People don't talk about this guy. He never gets brought up in the same conversation as someone like Alice Waters, but very much was an inspiration to her in terms of farm to table. There was a 5.5-acre garden on the property. That was my first job at the restaurant, actually. Before I worked inside the restaurant, I worked at the garden. But he was also very wise when it came to wine. He was very savvy. He really knew his stuff. And I learned a lot about food and wine pairing from him. So taking that to the next step, I kind of seeked out other chefs who I wanted to work for. I spent a little time on the West Coast with a Grand Award wine list, kind of hoping to learn from a sommelier, and I didn't really get traction there. So I ended up in Atlanta working for a chef called Günter Seeger, who, again, very, very wine savvy, very knowledgeable, very niche, specifically around German wines, which was a big passion of mine at the time. And so I learned a lot from him. So it took some time for me to finally find, contemporaries or colleagues who were my senior who could really offer me that sort of guidance and teaching. And that happened again, finally, when I arrived in New York. People like Andre Mack, Robert Bohr, Daniel Jonas. These are people I kind of learned from. I have always had this mindset that it's important never to be the smartest person in the room if you're interested in learning something. So I seeked out places where I was out of my league. I eventually managed to shed that feeling of imposter syndrome that came about of the reciting what I'd read in the afternoon back again at night, and got to learn that I did know something about wine and sort of built on that confidence from there. But a lot of it was, I can't say that it wasn't self-taught, but it wasn't taught by one individual or one path.
Yeah, and a lot of experiential and, in between that. I mean, the simple fact that, quite frankly, I'm super impressed you could read something, remember, later on. I mean, I don't know what that says about me, but these days it's like, being able to retain that type of knowledge and like put it into a setting. And
you say that, Alice, but anything you read that you find interesting, you're engaged by and you remember. And I was really engaged by the subject,
Fair. Yeah. I can hide vegetables into any toddler recipe like this.
Exactly. It's out of necessity sometimes.
Exactly. So you worked with in East Coast, West Coast, a couple of different places. For someone who's kind of in that, like, okay, I know I want to do this. I'm not quite sure how to go about it. What would you recommend that they do to like test what route would work best for them? Because you said like going down a certain route was best for you. Like, do you have a method?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this, and I try and make sure to make time for people if they're interested in getting into wine to see if I could be helpful. Not always my experience is going to be useful to them, but at least it's some point of view that they can hopefully find useful, either in the negative or the positive. And the thing I've learned that seems to resonate with especially younger people trying to get in the industry is that it's super important to try many things, but try them all robustly, which is to say, dip your toes in several different aspects of the wine business to see what works for you. How people learn is really the question at hand. It's not so much what kind of experience is going to equip you for the future. That'll come in time if you're committed to it. But it's important to understand what the best way for an individual one to learn is. And so I always say, take a few hours a week working in a wine shop, try and get involved in a restaurant where you feel like you can vibe with the wine person and that they will have the space to be able to create opportunity for you, even if they're not giving you a job as a sommelier, a chance to taste bottles that they're opening, a chance to learn about the wines on the wine list, a chance to visit wineries, that kind of thing. But don't do this with sort of a dilettante approach, which is often my biggest concern when young people get interested in wine, is that they might dip their toes in, but dip them in very tiny amounts across a wide range of possibilities. Because if you don't robustly engage in some sort of work around wine, then there is no commitment on your part. And frankly, that tends to energetically reflect in the experience that you have. And so that's sort of the broad strokes advice I give people is pick a couple of things and commit to them, really invest time and energy in them. It's not a business you get into if you're looking to get rich when you're young, generally. It's not a business you get into if you don't like to work on your feet, because if you're in retail or you're in distribution or if you're in a restaurant, you're going to be on your toes and moving. So just, sort of clarifying those things. And increasingly, it's technologically more possible for people without a great, a substantial skill set in terms of organization or pricing things, working with back of house, Excel, etc., inventory management, things like that. But that level of organization is key. And so whatever you can do to not forget that. It's very easy to clock in, clock out, and work the floor in a restaurant and not give some thought to how it all comes together, how it's possible. But if you don't pay attention to that stuff, you won't really be able to get to the next level, especially when it comes to wine. Understanding the business is absolutely imperative to understanding the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. I love that. I particularly also love that initial comment where you said like it depends on like know what's the best way you learn, right? Because I think oftentimes like it's especially nowadays there's so many different avenues for that. And if you know you're an experiential learner, like how do you get that, right? I
Yeah,
retain knowledge by doing rather than reading.
exactly.
But this industry, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of information. I mean, there's a lot of information and a lot of different, but there's a lot of information and a lot of things to remember.
That's been
So find out what works for you. Um, so I want to kind of go back into a little bit the fact that you spent quite some time with Danielle
Danielle
at
Boulud,
Danielle Balud,
more than
our
half my
friend.
career.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And so that says a couple things. Um, and that's where we had met. Can you share like what one or two things during your time there? You were on the floor, you were in leadership positions, um, did a lot of consulting thereafter, et cetera. Can-
So
what about that?
timeline wise, I worked as the head sommelier of Restaurant Danielle, which is his flagship restaurant from 2009 to 2016, whereupon I took over oversight of the entire program for the restaurant group, primarily focused on the restaurants we owned as opposed to management deals, but still oversight on all of them, which at the time registered at around 17 or 18 restaurants. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I left and combined my consulting activities with an events business, Gracie Events. And we were subsequently sort of hired or rehired in 2021 when the world came back into a robust swing and there was business to be done again as consultants doing my previous job. And so outside of that COVID period, I basically worked for Chef Danielle from 2009 in May until this past August. So, it's fringing on 17 years. 16, 17 years. And it was amazing. I really loved the experience. He's an amazing guy. I remember you meeting him that time when the concept of Culinary Agents was starting to come together. And I'm not sure if you recall this, but I explained, I was like, yeah, when he's in front of you, you're the only person in the room, but like, just take it with a pinch of salt. I like to describe it as the man has a borderline offensive level of charm and charisma. It's overwhelming. So I learned an immense amount from him about how to manage a business, how to think about guest experience. He's also somebody who's very wine savvy and not only knows about wine, but actually cares about wine and its place on the table. That he's very French in that way, and I really respect and appreciate that. The biggest thing I learned was how to manage other people's hopes and expectations. I guess because when you're managing a big group and a lot of revenue, but you can't do it alone. You have to have talented people. You have to have talented people who are engaged, who are interested in the common goal, who are willing to work towards it. So it takes mentorship, it takes coaching, it takes inspiration. And I really learned how to do a lot of those things from that organization. And there's some key people in it, not just Chef Danielle, but of course, Daniel Jonas, who was the wine director before me, taught me a great deal, especially in terms of personnel management. I learned immense amounts about operations from Brett Truzzi, the then COO of the company. And so it was a spectacular experience. And, I couldn't have had it any better. It was the best wine job in New York City, probably at the time, getting to buy basically whatever I wanted. People would come in and then buy whatever I'd bought because we had such a robust clientele. Even as we had highs and lows of 3 Michelin stars down to 2, we lost a New York Times star. The week after we lost a New York Times star, we had all of our regulars in there, and it had the most phenomenal wine sales. They were basically like sympathy bottles. These people came in and bought, bottles 3x the price of what they usually spent just because they wanted to tell us that they loved us. It was a wild ride, but it was amazing.
Yeah, I often say that this industry is a center of gravity. It just like pulls you back in. But Chef Danielle, he himself is like the center of gravity as well. It's like creates this little family fiefdom around him, and it's you have these people in this industry, and they're all they're all at different levels and spread out everywhere. But to your earlier point, you find people, you learn from them, or you find the people that you admire, and you try to absorb whatever you can if you're not physically close to them through osmosis, but through their teachings, through what they're saying, what they're doing, and all that. So great. And when you went out on your own, because now you're really on your own. You were always kind of on your own in a great way, But doing like your consulting and doing the events, I mean, what were some of the challenges there? I would say that different from obviously working in a restaurant environment and having teams.
Well, the work became quite different, but the benefit of having done so many different things with Danielle, operations management, wine list management, personnel management, even figuring out legal requirements for various markets, how to get wine in and out of different markets, to different countries in some cases. All of that really informed me to how to manage teams, firstly, how to think about events, because event management at a very large scale, as what I was doing with Gracie events, isn't that different from a restaurant if you approach it from the right mindset. And if you do approach it that way, you're more likely to be successful in terms of the guest experience, not always in terms of, getting the spreadsheets right or the deliveries on time. But I had seen so many different scenarios from all those years working with Danielle, from private events in people's homes to large scale banquets that we did at the restaurant, et cetera, that I was quite equipped. Multitasking, the ability to communicate clearly, efficiently, the manner in which you gain support from team members, be they members of your own team or volunteers or consultants that you bring in. We had a group of sommeliers that would work all of the events. The ability to inspire them, engage them, make sure that they're fed, that they're getting what they're there for, giving them direction, giving them an ear and some of your time and honest attention. All of those things I think contributed to my success, and I really learned all those skills by working within the Balut group. For
I love
sure.
that. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm actively working now with 2 different aspects of the hospitality industry as a consultant, as well as a bunch of private clients. Private clients, I'm managing their wine purchases or their wine collections, depending on the scale and what they're up to. Hospitality wise, I'm working now with a dear friend, Helen of Saigon Social, and she's preparing to open her second restaurant, wherein we're going to do a pretty interesting wine program. So I'll be overseeing those 2 programs and others, small hospitality consulting opportunities that have come up around the country that I'm sort of working through what makes sense and what doesn't. This services I'm essentially offering is my expertise after 25 years in the business. I know how to buy wine, I know who to hire, and I know how to execute because I've seen all the trappings of what not to do. So that's what I'm up to for the most part. And then I'm also doing a little consulting on the side of distribution with a startup that's doing something pretty interesting in the wine space in New York for the moment, but hopefully will scale in a big way down the road, which is a way to offer on-demand inventory during service for a restaurant. So a restaurant could put wines on the wine list that it doesn't physically have on site, order it through an app when a guest orders it, and have it delivered very quickly. So this opens up a real interesting opportunity for restaurants without a lot of space and without a lot of storage, especially temperature control storage, and without a lot of cash on hand to hold inventory, to still have interesting wine programs. And so that's what I'm keeping myself busy with right now. I also doing a little writing and some podcasting on Substack.
I love it. Like dipping your toes in a couple of different areas.
Keeping myself busy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's you've seen so many things over a course of time. Is there anything in particular that you're like really excited about when it relates to wine?
I recently moved to Brooklyn and I quite love it here. I'm sitting here in my living room in sunny Brooklyn in Williamsburg. And we hear so much today in the news about how young people are not drinking wine. They've eschewed their interest. They're, not drinking as much alcohol. Certainly there's a lot of trends that are absolutely true and can't be ignored. But it's inspiring to see a lot of young people still drinking wine, and certainly in this neighborhood, and it got me realizing in many other neighborhoods. What they're interested in terms of wine is very intriguing to me. And so I hope to spend the rest of my career kind of focused on making sure that the wines I love are also offering that sort of interest to a clientele. I think there's a lot of interesting wine bars presenting what started as like a very natural wine movement, almost to the point where it became a little boring, especially here in Williamsburg, where every restaurant seemed to have the same wine list, say for 2 or 3. Now it feels like it's matured to a point like you see in Paris, where you really have some personality in the wine programs here and some real value. So that's exciting. I think that the movement towards farming that is organic or akin to it, at least, is very interesting, because I think that just that connectivity with the land and the reality that this is an agricultural product, but is also interesting because it's an artisanal product, is fantastic. It's not just the case that more winemakers and wine producers are working that way, but that consumers actually care. They are more educated about it. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about on my Substack in terms of the journalistic work I'm doing. And I'm just excited about the world of wine in general. I mean, I've been lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time in France. I always say I learn more from winemakers than I do from anyone else. And so I try and visit as often as possible. And I see a real sort of renaissance period for quality wine. If people are drinking less, I have a feeling that they're drinking better. It does seem to be the case from the clients that I deal with, and certainly the people who engage in my content. And I hope that continues. And I think it's exciting.
Right, great. On that note, let's go to quickfire. What advice would you tell your younger self?
Patience is a virtue. Typically, the first reaction one wants to have, especially in stressful situations, is not the one that'll benefit everybody the most. And secondly, whenever you have a set of options in front of you in terms of a dealing or a negotiation with, be it an employer or a purveyor or a guest or anybody really, try and imagine the scenario in which everybody wins something and work from there, work backwards from there to see what's possible and what's feasible and what the absolute necessities are. Because asserting your own point of view and a you first mindset will only take you so far in the world. And it's that little bit of generosity will always benefit the greater whole. And in the end, you will win.
What's your advice for someone struggling in the industry?
There's 2 different paths that anyone who's really having like an existential crisis in terms of hospitality can take. And the number one thing that I like to tell people is that both are okay. Once you come to realize that, then you're kind of able to see that the worst things about the path of staying in the industry, the things that bother you the most, are either not such a big deal or they're more manageable than you thought they were. Very often when you're caught in feeling like you're caught in a corner, especially if you've invested a lot in this industry as your career, you can feel like you have an A or B conundrum, but there's always a C and there's always a D. There's always other options. If you quit the industry and you go do something else, it's going to be fine. If you, don't fire the course correctly for the next during the next service for that table, or you forget a bottle of wine and they don't get it until it's too late, nobody's going to die. It's not life or death. It's just dinner. And so having the presence of mind to realize that it's something that you can control in terms of what your choices are, and that it's not such a big deal, can kind of take some of the pressure off. So
What's your advice for fellow hospitality leaders?
always make time for your colleagues in the industry, be they junior to you in terms of experience or stature, or senior. Always make time to check in with them in terms of their career growth, but also in terms of their personal stability and health. These are all super important things. And especially if you're in a management role, when you're in a management role, it's very difficult to sometimes see the forest from the trees, because you're just trying to keep the ship from, tilting too much in one direction or the other. Be human and remember that every individual is only going to contribute positively if they're okay. And so be human first and make sure you take care of people. That'll always work out best for you in the end.
Yes. Especially in hospitality, right? It's like the mantra.
It's an alarmingly inhumane business at the core of it, just because it's tough. But that's at antithesis and antithetical to what it should be, and certainly to my approach.
Yes, just on that note, Raj, thank you so much for sharing your career path, your advice. There's so many great nuggets in this episode. And can't wait to see more from you with your new projects. And thank you again for all of your support over the years with myself and Culinary Agents. Certainly always appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Remember, success looks different for everyone in hospitality. No two paths are the same. If you have a leader or a topic you want to hear about, email media@culinaryagents.com. Hospitality on the Rise is brought to you by Culinary Agents, connecting top talent with employers since 2012. Whether you're hiring or looking for your next opportunity, join us at culinaryagents.com. For more inspiration, subscribe to Hospitality on the Rise and visit hospitalitycareerpaths.com, a free platform by Culinary Agents. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you love this episode, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration.